What happens when someone builds a thriving career in finance and then walks away because something deeper is calling? John Oberg is not just the founder and CEO of Prasina Health, a company transforming how diabetes and chronic conditions are treated across America. He's a man who's made a radical pivot from Wall Street to the front lines of metabolic health, driven by the conviction that the system was broken and that people deserve better. Under his leadership, Prasina has become a force in reversing type 2 diabetes through lifestyle medicine, empowering patients to reclaim their health rather than managing lifelong decline. But John's story is not only about business, it's about identity, purpose, faith, risk, and the quiet courage it takes to build something mission-driven in a profit-driven world. He's also the author of Tales of Abundance, a reflection of mindset, prosperity, and living in alignment with deeper values. John represents a rare intersection of financial acumen, spiritual grounding, and health innovation. His journey challenges the conventional definition of success and asks a more uncomfortable question. What's wealth? This is a conversation about building companies that heal, leading with conviction, and redefining what enough means. And before we hop into the podcast, a quick word from our sponsor, Deep Wealth and the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. We have William, a graduate of Deep Wealth Mastery, and he says, I didn't have the time for Deep Wealth Mastery, but I made the time and I'm glad I did. What I learned goes far beyond any other executive program or coach I've ever experienced. Or how about Bruce? Bruce says, before Deep Wealth Mastery, the challenge I had with most business programs, coaches, or books was that they were one-dimensional. Through Deep Wealth Mastery, I'm part of a richer community of other successful business owners. The idea shared forever changed the trajectory of the business, and best of all, the experience was fun. And we'll round things out with Stacy. Stacy said, I wish I had access to the Deep Wealth Mastery before my liquidity event, as it would have been extremely helpful. Deep Wealth Mastery exceeded my expectations in terms of content and quality. And you know what, my Deep Wealth Nation, why they're saying this is because Deep Wealth Mastery, it's the only system based on a 9-figure deal. That was my deal. And as you know, I said no to a 7-figure offer, and I created a system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery that helped myself and my business partners welcome from a different buyer, a different offer, a 9-figure exit. So if you're interested in growing your profits, preparing for a future liquidity event, if that's 2 years away or 20 years away, and you want to optimize your post-exit life, Deep Wealth Mastery is for you. Please email success@deepwealth.com. Again, that's success, SUCCESS @deepwealth.com. We'll send you all the information about Deep Wealth Mastery, otherwise known as Scale for Ultimate Sale. That's where you want to be. You want to be with other successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders just like you who are looking to create market disruptions, and they want to lock in their financial freedom and have success and fulfillment. That's the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It has your name on it. All you need to do is take the next step. Send an email to success@deepwealth.com. Deep Wealth Nation, welcome to another episode of the Deep Wealth Podcast. Well, you're no stranger to the very special guest that we have today in the Deep Wealth Podcast. You've heard him before just a short while back. I got to tell you, Deep Wealth Nation, after we stopped recording, John and I were speaking offline and we both had so much fun. John was very gracious and said, Jeffrey, you got to come onto my podcast. And I said, hey, why don't you come back for a follow-up? Why don't we cover all the things that we couldn't cover in the first round? So John, welcome back to the Deep Wealth Podcast. And once again, it is such a delight and a pleasure to have you back with us. You already covered the story behind the story. I was wondering though, you're successful. You're a very modest guy, but you're successful and you've done so much. And I know sometimes we are never a prophet in our hometown, but you have accomplished so much. You've been so many places. You've changed so many lives. Can you share with us the other story behind the story that we haven't yet covered? Why did you get into your entrepreneurial career? What got you there? And while you're doing that, when did health begin to come onto the scene? And perhaps we can talk about that and eventually see where that takes us, but maybe merge everything up, your entrepreneurial career, your exits, what you're doing on the health side. We talked about the type 2 diabetes reversal, all of that. We'll throw that into the mix and do a little bit of tap dancing real time here and see where that takes us. What do you think?
My story probably begins before my business career. There's some things that shaped me pretty early on. And this is a well-publicized story, so I'm not trying to be dramatic. My father passed away when I was really young. It was a fairly dramatic event. And it really had me think about the future in ways that I'm sure not a lot of children think about the future. And so that shaped me psychologically for a long period of time. And so when I got into my career during and after college, I joined a privately held company. It was successful in its own right. And I started working in sales and sales management. And I took a number of promotions very quickly throughout the years and generally considered pretty successful in that company. I was inducted into their corporate hall of fame, I think, around the age of 30. And so, but at some point it was clear that I wasn't going to keep moving up in that company. And so I moved out of that firm and went back to school. I went to get a master's degree and started working with one of my professors who was also a consultant, working on tech transfer and how do you spin technology out of a nuclear laboratory. And that was super fun because I got to see all kinds of technologies that were being developed and see what things you could commercialize. And that was probably my first real exposure to entrepreneurship, along with some consulting work that I was doing during that time. I had some contacts into some companies that were working in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I got a little bit of exposure into the world of gaming. And so a very interesting industry, a very different industry in different states, I found out. But I was able to learn about how you do due diligence into a business and what drives financial versus strategic decision making when companies are bought and sold. And so that was a really interesting time for me as my master's degree is an MBA with concentrations in commercialization of technology or management of technology. And then I also got a concentration in policy and planning. So I got to learn a lot about the people side of things and then also the technology commercialization side of things. And that kind of, I ended up starting a company at that point. It was called Mobile Evolution. And with a couple of really smart technical people on the technical team, we wrote the patents for credit card processing on a mobile device back when people were using flip phones before smartphones were a thing. And so that was a pretty cool event. And we raised a bunch of money and we were too early. We did that in 2004, 2005, 2006. The iPhone didn't come on the scene until 2008. And so we did a really good job of putting that company into the ground.
Well, let's speak about that for just a moment. We'll put a pause on things with your journey because I look at myself as an example. I'll put myself under the microscope and then pass the torch over to you. If I were to try and replicate what I did with Embanet today, I would fail. Just marketplace changes, technology changes. What worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work today. What I would have confidence in, though, is how I approach business, how I look at the world, how I say, okay, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 5. Let's figure out how to get there. Sure. And that's Jeffrey with his bootstrapping mode, and that may not be your mode. You may be more, well, let's get some venture capital or some PE. But putting that aside, John, when you look back when you started in business and whether you drove it to the stars and the moon and everything else, or it was into the ground or somewhere in between, looking back, what would be some approaches to business or some strategies that you might be able to share with Deep Wealth Nation that either didn't serve you well or served you very well, that it's really timeless, independent of technology or market sentiment or where things are?
Someone was talking about starting a business, like, well, what do I do? I was like, well, have you talked to 200 people in the industry? Have you talked to the buyers? Have you talked to the vendors? Have you talked to all the people? I always get worried for people who have a great mousetrap and they are a solution in search of a problem. That's always concerning to me. And so there was some research done heuristically by some private equity people years ago. And it was like, I can't remember the number, I'll make it up. It was like 700 private equity firms and all their portfolios. And they looked at the success of people who started companies. And whether it was private equity backed or not, it was multiple founders that came from the industry. And their average age was like 45 with 20 years of experience in the industry. And that's not saying that you can't be successful if you're not in the industry, but you better know the industry like you've been in it for 20 years. And so in the absence of that 20 years of experience, I think hundreds of interviews are really important. Having well-crafted questions where you're not drinking your own Kool-Aid, right? You're not just trying to like validate your own position, but you're genuinely curious about problems, genuinely curious about value exchange, genuinely curious about solving something that's real value creation. I think that's a step that gets skipped sometimes. And to the detriment of, I'll give you an example. I have invested in a lot of companies. A guy came to me recently and he's like, look at this really cool product. Look how awesome it is. And I was like, well, I work in that space. And I'm going to tell you, your buyer doesn't think it's a problem. And you're up against all these other technologies and your message is falling flat with me. So I'm only telling you this to try to help you. I'm not trying to poo-poo you, but I don't think. And so then he went and asked my friend for money. My friend's like, what do you think? And I with the same conversation, my friend's like, yeah, I'm not going to invest. And for understandable reasons.
And so what you just ran through in seconds, because you have the experience, you've been on both sides of the table, and now that you're investing, it's a different side of things that you have on the line. It's your money, it's your future profits, it's your opportunity cost. When we're a founder, it's the same, but it's different. And so for someone who's in Deep Wealth Nation, and perhaps they're looking for the next market disruption, or perhaps they're brand new in business. I know as a founder myself, the founder mindset would sometimes blind me to the shockingly obvious that I just didn't see. And it took me down a path that was wasted time, effort, and money. So as an investor, what would you want the founders in Deep Wealth Nation to know? Maybe they've been at it for decades, or maybe this is day one, but everything else in between. What would be some guidelines or some guardrails of, hey, when you're doing this, here's what, as an investor, your future investor, maybe even a future buyer for your company, here's what's going through my mind. You better make sure that you have these boxes checked before you ever speak
Yeah.
to someone like myself.
It depends on the stage of the company and what the risk profile looks like. But the high level, what I would say is I bet on people. Like, so I want to know that the person is a winner. They have a history of winning, and they have a history of kind of the appropriate balance of optimism with curiosity and enough ability to take in information to change course so they don't run themselves and along with the capital of the investor right off the cliff. Then I like to invest alongside other people who are expert in an industry if I'm not an expert. So either I want to be able to have real influence where I can help influence the outcome positively for the place that I'm putting money in so I can be helpful with my network. I need to do something so that I can actually tip the scales in their favor or invest alongside someone who can do that for them. And so I want an unfair advantage.
So what I'm hearing you say in Deep Wealth Nation, let's play close attention here. What I'm hearing you say, John, is if you're going to be coming in as an investor, number one, who is the team? Who are the people that are surrounding that founder? And in addition to maybe they're in the company, but if they're not in the company, has that founder surrounded him or herself with people in the industry who, I don't know if thought leaders would be the right word, but they know their stuff. They know where things are going. They know where things are not. And that's giving you confidence. Okay, yeah, Jeffrey has a great team around him. He's networked and has on his board, or he regularly confides in these incredible thought leaders who have been in the industry forever. They know where things are going. Yeah, he's well plugged in. Got it. That gives me some confidence that he's not going to be perfect, but for the most part, he's going to get a sense of his North Star and he's heading the right way. How am I doing with that?
I think that's pretty close. I think the things that I really dive into, if it's depending on the stage of the company, I really want to understand either the go-to-market plan or the scaling plan, depending on where they are. And I'm really listening for if that's coming out of an academic textbook or if it's coming from hard-won lessons where people have real answers that make sense to me. And by the way, I think there are people that may have great plans that I just can't wrap my head around, which makes me not a smart investor for them. So not good for me, but worse, not good for them. The worst thing you want is someone who's invested in your company who can't add value or is going to distract you in the process.
Okay, so you're looking at connections, you're looking at the strength of the team, the strength of the bench, where they are in the industry. And then from your side, okay, can I add value? So in addition to writing the check, that's all fine and easy. Your particular investing style is I don't want to be passive. I don't want to be silent behind the scenes. Where I can, where I'm able to, I want to add some value. So does the business, does the industry, does the opportunity, does the problem that they want to crack, is that something of interest for me? Is that something that gets me fired up and being passionate? Which goes right back to what you're sharing with that founder who approached you. Hey, Deep Wealth Nation, are you trying to solve the right problem in the first place? Or are you going down a path that, hey, it's probably a waste of time and money and you should be focusing on other things? So how as founders, it sounds so easy from the outside looking in, when we're drinking our own Kool-Aid, what would be some guardrails, John, based on your own experiences of, is this the right problem? Am I going down the right path? Or, hey, stop, don't pass go, don't collect your $200, go in the other direction. Let's get out of jail here, pick a bigger and better problem.
I think mentorship is a really great tool for entrepreneurs. Like I try to mentor 3 people who are 10 years behind me. And then I like to have mentors, 3 of them that are 10 years ahead of me. And I started by wanting mentors to mentor me. And I didn't find them right out of the gate. So I started by mentoring people that were 10 years behind me. And as I started mentoring people 10 years behind me, mentors showed up for me that were 10 years ahead of me. And I had some mentors that were very specifically, there were areas of things they were going to mentor me in. And eventually I had one or two mentors who I could look at kind of their whole life and they could speak to me more broadly about life. And so I do think having really smart mentors around is a helpful thing because I can remember some of the things that were said to me over the years. One of them, I said, well, as we get into mentoring, I want to share with you kind of like my core values and my beliefs and what my priorities are. And he said, oh, I don't need you to do that. Just show me your checkbook and your calendar. I'll tell you what your priorities are. And that hit me like a 1,000-ton train. I was like,
Uh-huh.
ooh, can I come back to you in 90 days so my bank statements and my calendar look different? Because I don't like the answer today. And he just smiled. And it was one of the best lessons I've had.
Wow. And so, deportation, what's coming out for me, and I hope you're paying attention, this is not a one person effort. It takes a village, as the saying goes, to really get out there and make successful. And one of the themes that you're sharing with us, whether it was early days or even today, after all this time that you've had, the success that you've had, it comes back to the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. And I suppose Jim Rohn's quote, one of my favorite, you are the average of the
Yeah.
5 people that you're spending the most amount of time with. And so when it comes to finding those mentors, where do we begin and how do we approach a mentor, particularly if they're successful, they're out there, they're on the
Yeah.
A's list, they're on the who's who? What does that look like?
I had someone reach out to me recently and they asked if I would mentor them. And I said, yes. I put the weight back on them to reach out. So I think a good mentee makes mentoring really easy for the mentor. They come occasionally, let's say once every 3 months or 4 months, with a specific question,
Mhm.
and they make it really easy for the mentor to be helpful. And then they follow up and let the mentor know whether that was helpful or not. When I mentor people, I've got a little bit more structure than that I use. But I think generally speaking, as you approach someone, it's like, would you mentor me? It's someone who doesn't have kind of a dog in the fight, as it were. And it's usually about a specific thing. But it's not just meandering. I think mentors want to add value if they're really successful and
Mhm.
they want to see that that value is being accepted. I do know that there's been people that I've mentored and nothing ever changed. And at some point I decided I wasn't being helpful to them. And so it wasn't useful for either one of us to spend time in that particular mode.
And so it's interesting because I know when we're looking for mentors, we're being selfish, and there's no judgment when I say selfish. It's in a good way. How can I better myself? How can I take
Sure.
through that mentorship myself or the company to the next level? You're sharing the flip side of that is, hey, Jeffrey, I love to mentor. I'm just not going to mentor for the sake of mentoring. There are certain things that I want to get out of this. And I know for each person, it's going to be different. But John, for someone like yourself, what would be some of the key criteria of this mentoring kind of relationship?
Yeah, for me personally, is making sure the time is well invested. If it's helping somebody else, even if it's not helping me, I don't even really think if it helps me or not. It's really about what am I doing to give back. But if I'm giving back and that person, it's not helping them, it's not in some way, shape, or form, then, it's like it may be distracting them. And I don't want to be a distraction for somebody. And I'm very thoughtful when I mentor that, like, I don't want to push my agenda, needs, any of those things onto somebody. I really am there to help them get further on their path for them, not get them onto some path that or agenda that I have. So it's not really about what I want as much as it is I want to be sure that I'm doing no harm.
Okay, so you're doing no harm. Your time is invested wisely. It's making a difference. It's making an impact. I'll make a big supposition here, but I suppose is the mentee actually taking to heart what I'm sharing and meaningfully trying to make that difference? And am I seeing that effort
That's
being
right.
made
Yeah.
with what I'm sharing?
Yeah, that's right.
And so mentorship for you was huge and made a big difference in your career and your success of where it got you to today. What else, though, looking back, were some things that made a difference for you to help get you to where you are?
I think one of the big ones is how I see relationships professionally. There was a big change for me, probably 12 or 13 years into my career, where it went from being a series of kind of transactional relationships in my professional life to a series of professional relationships that were more meaningful long term, value producing certainly, but it was no longer a quid pro quo where everything had an exchange of value all the time, every time. A great book that I read along the way was The Go Giver. And
Oh, I love
I
that
think
book. Yeah.
I think that knowing that I don't need everything to come my way all the time. Like I just But there are also times where, if someone's taking advantage, being able to be thoughtful and diligent about not letting myself be taken advantage of either. Where's the balance? And so I think that book, The Trusted Advisor, there are a couple really good books that I read along the way that I think shaped my thinking around healthy, strong professional relationships. As a result, we talked a lot about my medical practice. I have a side consulting business that I run. And some of the clients I've had in that consulting business have been clients through 3 or 4 companies over 20 years. I mean, you're not going to be shocked to hear that because I'm sure you have the same type of relationship with people that you work with. And so that's what I value. I value having people that I enjoy working with day to day, that I want to be around, that I want to create value with them. And that way you can look at wealth financially, but you can also look at wealth of friendships or wealth of health, all the things I'm sure that you're talking about every day.
Absolutely. And circling back to what you said, I'm sure you've all been there. I know I've certainly been there where I take people at face value. I take people more times than not. They've got a good heart. They're going to do the right thing. And John, guess what? There are some people where it's the opposite of what they're saying, and I've been taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And how coming out of that, it could be, okay, I'm never going to trust anyone again, and I'm just going to do everything myself, or I'm going to keep on trusting, and it's not going to be once bitten, twice shy. The same thing keeps on going. There's always moderation. There's always a balance. And so when you've been taken advantage of in any number of ways, perhaps someone took advantage of your generosity with your time or with your investment money and really took you for a ride in the wrong way. How do you come back from that and not let that taint you in a negative way to prevent future opportunities where, yeah, it is the real deal and they're a great person. It's a great opportunity. And with your help, whether it be time or investment, it can be taken to the next level.
I think for me, I try to learn lessons. If I've made mistakes in the past, I want to learn lessons. My wife has this great saying professionally. She says, instead of feedback, feed forward. Okay, what does that mean? It's like what happened in the past feeds forward into your lessons of the future. So if something happened in the past, how do you not make that mistake again? But also not being so calloused that you're not willing to take a risk, take a chance. And I think for me, I try to be pretty open-handed with my trust in general. And it has burned me in the past. Like there are certainly a number of circumstances where that's burned me, but I have a very abundance kind of framed mindset. That risk is not defining to me. I can move on, move forward, take the good from it and move on. And so, I mean, this has happened to me a couple times more recently in the last 4 or 5 years. And so I just focus on what's next. Okay, what's next? And then I've also learned that I don't have to be all or nothing about trust. Like I can trust someone a little, then a little more, then a little more. But that took me a couple of years of therapy to figure that out. I remember a priest talking to me one time and he's trust is like an onion. There's different layers to it and that's okay. And then I think for me, I think when people believe in something bigger than themselves, for me, I'm a Catholic and that's my kind of mental model. I know other people that have different mental models that work well for them. But believing in something bigger than yourself is biologically appropriate. Like we're a community animal. If you look at the sociology of humans over the last 20,000 years, we're designed to be in community. And so that is a mental model that works really well for me to lean into trust and then recognize that sometimes you migrate between groups in your life. There's some friendship groups that serve you for a period of time, and there's some that last a lifetime. And sometimes you don't know which is which. And so, but trying to be open-minded and grateful, I think gratitude's played a really important part in my life.
It's interesting. And Deep Nation, with what I'm going to share next, please stay with us because if this is not your thing, don't tune out. I'm going to use the word God. You may use the word universe or creator, or maybe not at all. And that's okay. There's no judgment here, but be curious. Come in with an open mind to some of the things that we're going to be talking about now. And also goes back to what John was sharing with us. Part of his success was being curious. And so, John, I know for yourself, faith is a big part of your life, especially now. Wasn't always. Same
True.
for myself. And it's interesting, this morning in my Bible study, we were talking about this as we wrapped up the book of John. We were talking about, okay, well, how has having God in our lives, we're talking as a group, as myself and my business partner, how has that made a difference for us? And we were openly reflecting upon that. And to what you're saying, I know for myself, one of the things that has made very apparent, to your point, through blessings, through prayers, circumstances will happen or people will come into my life. Maybe it's just for an instance, but that's exactly where they're supposed to be for that one specific moment, or maybe for it's the longer time. But for myself, it's the confidence, it's the faith in the true sense of the word of knowing, okay, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be with the people that I'm supposed to be with. This is all preordained in a very powerful way I don't necessarily need to understand. And there's a sense of calm, at least for me, that I feel when thinking about that. As we're
Yeah.
talking about this, how about yourself? How does faith begin to play a role for you, your relationship with God in areas of the unknown? You're in perhaps it's a new investment or a new venture, or even what you're doing right now. This is all new. You don't know how it's going to turn out. How
Yeah.
does that play a role for you?
I think praying every day and praying at every moment would be the ideal situation for me to be in. If I could say a quick prayer before every sentence on this show, I think it runs the risk of like, I want to wear my faith life on my sleeve in the sense I'm not in any way embarrassed by it. But to your point earlier, no judgment either, right? Like, I think my model for talking to people about it is I'm happy to share my story. If that's not your story, it's okay. Everyone's in a different place spiritually, and I think I accept that. And so for me, I just try to practice radical acceptance and for people to feel loved when they meet with me. And if they want to talk about this, great. And if they don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. But when I was able to get to a place where I could receive people caring for me and I didn't have to control everything and I could
Yeah.
accept there were things I couldn't understand, like, boy, that it made a real difference for me. Like that acceptance that I can only control my thoughts and my actions and that there's a lot I couldn't control, and that I could accept people for who they were, even if they were different than me. It opened up so many relationships and so many conversations. And someone said that, I can't remember the famous person said, like the ability to hold two opposing thoughts in your brain at the same time was a sign of intelligence. The world has really moved away from that for reasons that fit marketing and for reasons that fit power and control. And I would like us to be able just to have better, deeper conversations, even where we don't necessarily agree, for the purpose of curiosity and caring and learning and moving ourselves forward. And I think the world would be a better place if we all took a step in that direction.
Yeah, my goodness, it sure would be. And as you're speaking about that, control and trying to control other people and the stress that it creates, I want to tie that into something that offline we were speaking with. Not a lot of people do this though. And I know I'm guilty as charged with this because for me, it was business. Jeffrey, live the crazy, insane life now so that later on you won't have to and achieve and cross that finish line and get that
Yeah.
material success now. And the assumption was that I'll be around and I'll be able to undo
Yeah.
whatever was done on the health side with a very unhealthy lifestyle. And so I know a life map is very important to you and you're very
Yeah.
contemplative and you're thinking not just for today, but also long term. And that
Yeah.
shows in your success in business, also your success in life and what you've been doing. So when did that begin to play a role in your life map when it came to your health or perhaps lack of health at times? What does that look like for you? What's that narrative?
Yeah. I wrote my first kind of life plan when I was 19 years old at the urging of a mentor. No shock there, right? And so I've had some version of that document on and off since I was 19 years old. I'm 53 now. And it's gone through times where I didn't touch it for 5 years. There's been times I looked at it weekly for a quarter and updated it and made it better. It's taken all shapes and forms over the years. But I try to think about, what do I want my life to be like 10 years from now? And if that's true, what do I have to do today to make that so? And so my 10-year plan is pretty broad and directional, but my daily plan is pretty deliberate and immediate. That's how I think about a life plan. And I think there's phases to your life. Like I've got a son who's 21, a daughter who's 23, and a son who's 15. And so when I talk to them about where they are in their careers, like they're in that kind of like individual contributor, learn a craft part of their career. And then later you move into the part where you learn your craft and you move into like how to use leverage with
Yep.
your craft.
Yep.
And from there you learn how to have like broad impact in your career in the way that you're shaped to do that. You're either an expert craftsman, you
Mhm.
could be a master plumber, you could be a CEO, or you could be both. So, but there's that third phase of life where you're at the peak of your game. And then the fourth part of your career is where you're giving back as the sage, the statesman, the queen of the environment. And so I'm in the third stage right now, just sociologically, right? But I know that in about 10 to 15 years, I'll be in that fourth stage. And so, what are the things that I want and need to do now to not have a rough transition later on? Because I've coached a lot of people throughout the years for going through that retirement transition,
Mhm.
and it leads to depression, it leads to flailing, it leads to unhappiness, all these things. And so, the people that I've helped think through that ahead of time, it's a much smoother transition from the kind of peak of a career into the kind of giving back part of their career.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I have as you're talking about that, it's a privilege to be able to do that. You've earned that. You've paid your stripes. You've gone to the School of Hard Knocks. You came out with a PhD in areas you didn't necessarily sign up for or knew ahead of time that you're signing up for. So going back to the health side of things, then, knowing what I know now, I consider myself fortunate and you're in the same position. John, if you and I don't want to do something, if we don't want to show up to something, we're likely not going to do it. And 9 times out of 10, we'll say no, and we have that flexibility. So as an example, if there's an event that's past my bedtime, so to speak, and I'm early to bed, early to rise, and Default Nation, when I say early to bed, I'm usually in bed 8 o'clock, 8:15, hoping to be asleep by 8:30 more times than not, and I'll be up. My aim is around 5:30. Usually it's closer to 5, somewhere in between there. Sometimes a tad before, a tad after. I look to keep that consistent. So if there's going to be an event that's going to be 9 or 10 at night, I'll politely decline because I can. And it's of more times than not, no consequence. Always exceptions. I get that, especially for family now.
Sure.
Back in the day, though, I wouldn't necessarily be in that position to be able to do that, and there would be consequences. And I look at my eldest daughter, who's now at a startup in the CPG industry, doing some incredible things, and I see what's being asked of her. And back in the day, same of me, and I'd be okay.
Sure.
Jump how high, and how do we? Trying to find the words here. Find that I don't believe in balance; it's more blending. But how do we take care of our health on the one hand, and not railroad ourselves for opportunities and business on the other hand, knowing what we both know? And we'll talk more about that on the health side of what you've been doing. And we'll do that in part one of our podcast interview and more here. How do you handle that? What would you suggest?
It's such a deep question. I talked about my life plan. I have my core values on there. And for years, I had the core value of balance. And it didn't sit well with me at all. And what I figured out was I didn't actually value balance. I valued deliberateness.
Mm-hmm.
And so by being deliberate, by really choosing where I was going to invest my time and my treasure and my talent, like that was the thing that really got me going. And so when my kids were younger, I was joking with one of my sons this week, like I used to go meet him for lunch at his school occasionally. I'd work 35 hours a week and I was doing really well in those 35, sometimes 40 hours a week. Now I'm working much harder than that. And the kids are watching me work harder. 2 of them are out of the house. But I can deliberately spend time with my kids, deliberately spend time with my wife. And so I think deliberate is the word that I choose to make sure that I get the really high intensity quality time and also the amount of time they need in those relationships and with my friendships and with, and so, but I'm not scared to work on a weekend occasionally if I want to, and I don't have to. And so I can make those choices and I can vacation in nice spots. And I've taken more 2-week vacations in the last 10 years than I did in the first 40 years of my life. And I feel really good about it. And I punch out. Like I know people that when they're on their vacation, they believe in that blended. I'm still available for work. When I'm on vacation, people that work with me know, like I am like, you can get a hold of me if there's truly an emergency. It better be an emergency. I can't remember the last time I was interrupted on vacation.
Sure. And again, that comes from your experience and you've earned that privilege, that right, and you're at a point in your life where you can do that. So to a founder in Default Nation who's now saying, okay, guys, this sounds great. Easy for both of you to say that. Because you can, and you've done that. And okay, so what? If it doesn't work out, no big deal. You'll go on, you'll live another day, and you have what you've earned up to this point, and it's serving you very well. So using that deliberate approach of, okay, we're going to throw balance out the window. It's going to be deliberate in terms of what we're doing. For someone who's saying, yeah, guys, I hear you, but I'm still going to go for it. And I'm going to put my health off to the side because I'll figure this out after the fact, knowing what you know. And particularly now in the new business, when you're working with your clients, your patients, and you're seeing what's going on with them, what would you tell that founder in terms of how to look at this or balance it out or figure this out?
Mental health and physical health matter a lot. Like those things create energy and space for the smart thinking, for the good decision making. When I was getting my doctorate, I have a doctorate in social work. When I got that doctorate, I was 50 pounds heavier than I am today.
Wow. My goodness. Wow.
And I was writing in my doctoral capstone project about metabolic disease. Just think about the irony of that. Here I am studying metabolic disease in the middle of the pandemic, and my weight plateaus to 50 pounds heavier than what is reasonable. And I looked at my partner, who's a medical doctor, I was like, man, I'm my own worst patient. And he laughed. He's like, I wasn't going to say anything. But, and now I want to be my own best patient. And so I think there's things that if I were telling a founder like to go for it, going for it would include physical health. It would include mental health. Because if you don't do that, you don't have the capacity to be your best.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot to be in good physical health and good mental health if you're deliberate. So you can have both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that's a false narrative.
And so, John, what I'm hearing you say, and for Deep Wealth Nation, decide what you want. And so I know, as an example, again, I'll put myself under the microscope. My want is a long lifespan, at the same time, a healthy health span. So I don't want to be like that rocket ship up like most people, and then there's a fast decline. I want to square it out. I want to round out the corners, as it says. So it's being mobile, having my mental faculties, being able to move around, and all those wonderful things. So, Deep Wealth Nation, what is it that you want? John knows what he wants. And knowing what I know now, John, I can only hope that the younger Jeffrey, if I knew this when it came to health, and I wasn't so ignorant like I was back in the day, and ignorance is not bliss, that I would be able to come to terms with the fact that, okay, Jeffrey, put your health first. Yeah, you may cross the finish line slightly later, but the point is you're going to cross it healthier, better, stronger, with a longer lifespan, health span.
Maybe you cross it faster. I mean, taking a 20-minute walk might give you the space to cross the finish line faster, not slower. And so I think that the dichotomy you set up in some cases is a false dichotomy. And so I think little things you can do, like walking a little further or getting some exercise or choosing the healthy meal instead of the less healthy meal. Like, I reject the false dichotomy that you can't do both. Now, I'm not saying you can be a peak physical condition, 100-mile running athlete and go slay the dragon on the, like, maybe there's some things that don't fit in that way. But for the very successful professionals that I work with, they're able to find time for both. It's the sleeping in the garage and at the office narrative that maybe isn't the most helpful narrative to being successful in business or healthy.
Yeah. And John, thanks for calling me out, because the mindset that I was sharing, you're right. Hey, Jeffrey, well, why have that mindset? There's an old saying, if you want something done, give it to the busy person, because they don't have the time to meander around. Okay, yeah, here we go. I got to figure this out. I have other things to do. Yeah. And so with the right mindset, okay, my main goal, my outcome here is to be healthy. And any activities that aren't going to be there, it's going to affect me physically or mentally, it's just not going to happen. You're right.
But accountability is important, right? So I have accountability partners for my exercise because I won't exercise just given to my own devices. So I've had to set up structures to show up to exercise. You know, I saw this great meme online with a glass ball and a rubber ball. And it said, if you're juggling balls, you just need to know which ones are glass and which ones are rubber. Like, which ones can you drop without damage and which ones break when you drop them. And for me, health, if I'm not working out at least 3 times a week, right, then that's a glass ball. That's my 4th and 5th workouts. Those are rubber balls. My first 3 workouts are glass balls. And so I got to know which ones I can't drop.
Love that. And as we're talking about this, you know, I'm thinking of a very successful advisor. I'm not going to name names. He was quirky in his own way, but he was known in the industry this was the guy who just wouldn't fly. So if you wanted to work with him, you better be prepared. He's incredible at what he does, but he's not going to fly to you. You're either flying to him. This is before the days of Zoom and virtual meetings and everything else. You're either flying to him or it's going to be a phone call. He's not going to come fly out to you, and it's going to be on his terms. And so perhaps the other part of it, John, as we're talking about this is, hey, Deep Wealth Nation, be so incredibly good at what you do that your results speak for you, that if you're a little quirky or you have some things like crazy Jeffrey, you know what, you're never going to see him past 8 o'clock at night at an event, or he doesn't do dinners or he doesn't do lunches. But wow, you really want to be with this guy because he gets stuff done. He gets the results. This is where you want to be. People make exceptions for that when your results speak for themselves. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, I love it. I would just add one more thing with a shout out to James Clear, who I've never met, but maybe someday I will. His book, Atomic Habits. I think when you build structure and habit around some of these things, it becomes easier and easier to have the life you want to have when it's habitual versus kind of disciplined. Relying on discipline isn't the easiest way to get through it. So
And explain to Deep Health Nation, John, why discipline is not a strategy.
Willpower breaks. That's just true. And so when you have habits, you don't get put into a position where you have to make the decision. It's habitual. I think there's some famous habits. Steve Jobs wearing the black turtleneck. I've got a blue polo on. And the last time we did this, I had a blue polo on. And the funny part about that is every Monday through Friday, I have a blue polo on. I'm not allowed to wear blue polos at date night with my wife, by the way, because that's my work uniform. But I don't want the cognitive overhead in the morning. It's like I put on a blue polo. And so that's just one habit that kind of lowers my cognitive overhead that gives me space for other things. I didn't make it up. People have seen that with famous entrepreneurs all the time. I thought the black turtleneck didn't really look that great on me. The blue polo is fine, timeless, easy enough. So I think there's just things we can do to make more space for the important work of our brain.
Absolutely. And love what you're sharing. Very similar to you. And hey, didn't invent it, heard about that. And hey, yeah, why not? And so oftentimes I'll be wearing the same clothes or whatever the case may be during the day because I don't want to think about it. I want my energy, my focus to be on, to me, what areas are more important. Now, maybe fashion's your thing, a whole different story. So we've talked about where you've been. We talked about where you're going and what you've been doing. We've talked about health. Let's now begin to bring that all together, John. So today, as you look at where you are today, and perhaps this is tomorrow or next month or next year, it's always changing. I get that. How are you successfully blending health with your business ambition? And by the way, I want to share a compliment with you. Despite your success, I'm choosing my words very carefully, despite your success, you're, to me, more ambitious now than perhaps you would have been at the start. And that's not always the case with a lot of post-exit entrepreneurs. The very early post-exitpreneur, otherwise known as Jeffrey, right after his exit, had no ambition. And wow, did I pay the price for that. And over the years, I've been saying, hey, you know what? I'm happier when I have the ambition. My ambition's actually growing year over year. Today, I feel like I have more ambition than I did back in my e-learning company days, which to me would sound impossible or astounding, but it actually is. And that gives me that little kick in my step because I'm excited about that. So how are you blending the health with your ambition, your vision, what you're doing on the business side? I would love to hear your inner workings on that.
For me right now, I've set a target for what I want to do professionally and how I want to leave an impact on the world. It comes back to some work I did around the Japanese have an ikigai, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it has the concepts of what are you good at and what are you passionate about and what will the world pay you for and what mark do you want to leave on the world? And so for me, I simplified it down to like, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? How do I want to spend my time? And then how do I want to be remembered? And it really, I've been thinking about this for a very long time, but it drove home in 2017 when my mom passed away. I had to write her a eulogy. And I thought about how she'd impacted the world in her professional life and how she impacted her friends and her family and what she did for fun and how that impacted the world. And then when I put all of that together into eulogy, it was like, I could only hope that I am half as loved as she was. And so that then became the roadmap for me about what do I need to do to have the health span longevity, to have the type of impact that I want to have. And that for me is physical health. It's also mental health and cognitive health. And so what are the things I can be doing down the middle, like center of the bullseye? Eating healthy, exercising. And then what do I need to be doing on the edges to give myself the best possible chance? Because I think there's some things that are a little less well known, but worth trying, right? And so I'm trying to do all of it. I'm trying to do all those things. And I work really hard still. I'm excited about doing that. I think that the evidence is pretty clear that the human body is designed to work. Right. And so if you look at sociology of the last, 20,000 years, there's different types of work people do at different stages of their professional life. Sages were sages for a reason. And so I think that happens later in the career. And so how do I make sure that I'm really leaning into every part of where I am today? And as importantly, trying not to get ahead of myself. I met someone recently who was graduating from college and they wanted to be a life coach right out of college. I just thought to myself, unless you're coaching college students, what's the value there? And so they had a good answer. They wanted to coach people that were coming up behind them. And I think they had some business model challenges, but I get that. So I think that I want to be right where I am. Like wherever you are, be there. And where I am right now is, I think I shared this last time. I think that there's 3.5 billion people that have some type of metabolic dysfunction. I think we can help 1 billion of them before I die. And we can do that by just how we treat them better. And so I think you and I have talked a little bit about this, but how do I measure the direct or indirect impact of 1 billion people by changing the way we treat metabolic disease? And I think we're on the way.
Absolutely love that. And speaking of ambition, and okay, yeah, Jeffrey, I want to see if I can do a billion people and maybe even more than that and get out there, change lives, save lives. I mean, that's huge. When did you realize that, hey, this is not only something that I can dream about, I can actually have an impact, and why not? Why not be me that's out there affecting and effecting a billion people? Because I know for some of us, come on, John, a billion people. Yeah, I hear you. I know you're great and successful, but a billion people, wouldn't that become from dream to I can make this a reality?
I used to be really scared to share this publicly because I was in a group of very successful people and I shared this goal and it put off a lot of people. Like there was a lot of people that were like clearly put off by it. And the group was being run by a psychologist who's pretty famous who brought these people together. And he's like, hey man, you can't be that vulnerable when you're sharing. I was like, there's a level of arrogance with it. And he was right. Like, I think it was not well delivered on my part for sure. But now I tell my team, it's like, we're going to be billionaires. And we don't measure in dollars, we measure in the number of lives we've improved. I just want to be bold about it now. I think a couple of people who are really close to me said, you can't worry about stepping on toes. If you want to make omelets, you got to crack some eggs. And so now I think we're just being less apologetic about the fact that medicine exists today that can help people. It's not being done as well as it could be. I don't blame anybody. The system is imperfect. I get that. Despite all of that, we have everything we need to be successful in the world right now to do this. And so I'm just going to pick up the banner and carry it until someone tells me I'm doing it wrong or there's a better way or whatever. But for right now, no one's doing it as well as we're doing it. And we're changing lives. And it's not about the money. It's about like literally people that have been uncontrolled with diabetes for 20 years for the first time getting into control, staying in control, feeling great, all the things they've wanted for 20 years. We finally have an approach that works for them, especially the really sick patients. And so I'm just trying to let my enthusiasm come out in ways. And if that offends someone, I guess I'm not going to be apologetic about that.
Yeah.
I want to help people. And if someone's going to get in the way of that, then cautiously and gently, I'm just going to move around that and keep helping people.
And as you're talking about that, John, and before we go into wrap up mode, I'm curious if I can ask a very personal question. With what you're doing now, looking back at a very young age, you suffered a huge loss. And then recently as well, you're sharing with me what's going on with your mother. And again, condolences with all of that. And I can relate to that because I lost my father, perhaps not as young as you. For me, though, it was a big loss and it was still young. He was 59 when he had passed away, far too young. And it impacts me in more ways that I can even think about even today. Something
Yeah.
comes up, oh yeah, that's probably coming from my ability or inability of dealing with the loss of my father. So in part of your ambition of, yeah, I want to affect and effect the lives of a billion people with what I'm doing, does loss, with loss of parents or loss in your life, is that playing a role in there or not at all? Or how does that affect you?
My mom's loss, she had chronic metabolic issues. My in-laws, chronic metabolic issues. And so I think there's a lot. And then when I looked at what was available, we had all the right answers in front of us, but no one was putting it together in a way that worked. And that frustrated me. And so that's how I went back to get my doctorate. And I was like, this is a solvable problem. And people who I didn't think that I was going to have the success I was going to have. And by the way, it wasn't just me. Like Dr. Dustin Williams, who's my partner, amazingly important part of the story. Like the medical stuff comes from him. And so I brought in the behavioral component. But I think what really drove me was this is going to sound silly. I was driving into work in 1995. I drove past a McDonald's sign. It said billions served. And I was like, man, if a dude can get a burger to serve a billion people or multiple billions of people, maybe I should try to help a billion people in some really positive way. And so I wrote it down in 1995 and didn't really know anything about how I was going to do that for the next 20 years. But I found that in a journal and I was like, that's the calling. That's the thing that's been marked on my heart that I want to work on. And I've tried to put it down dozens and dozens of times in my life. I feel real peace about pursuing this mission. And when I try to put the mission down to focus on only something else, I don't have the same peace.
And so, John, whether someone calls it this is your gut speaking to you, or God speaking to you, or the universe speaking to you,
Yeah.
it's intuition. There's a lot to be said about that. And certain people who perhaps, hey, if it doesn't exist in a complicated formula in a spreadsheet, it just doesn't exist. I mean, what you're talking about, Jeffrey, just it didn't sit well with me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's big. Sure, it sounds impossible, but I want to make it sound I'm possible. I get all that. So what was it that gave you, if I can use the word courage, confidence? I'm just going to do it. I can just feel it. I'm just going to
Yeah.
go for it.
I mean, candidly, my mother-in-law got sick and was in the hospital unnecessarily, and I got angry, and I started calling people, and I said, "I'm going to fix this problem," and I got the "haha, that's cute. You're not going to be able to fix it," and that was the hold my beer moment, right? Oh, it's not so easy as someone saying, "Well, John, you can't do it." Then I jump in, but it was kind of that. It was kind of like, you could never do that, and I was just like, "Watch me." That was what kicked it off.
It's such a classic entrepreneurial founder story. Hey, Jeffrey, I had a very personal issue in my life. It bothered me. And I know how I felt. I didn't want other people to feel like this. And I really wanted to solve it. I absolutely love that, John, with what you're doing and how you're making a difference out there. And just before we wrap things up, with what you're doing now, of the billion lives you're looking to change. And I love that with you and the team, you're counting your billions not in dollars, but in people and in lives that you're
Yeah.
impacting and saving. I know we went into depth in our first interview together of what you're doing with the types of diabetes and the health overall.
Yeah.
Quickly circling back to that, is there anything else that you want to add to that in terms of some insights or the difference that you're making or why we should be paying attention to this if we're not?
I think the thing that, if it wasn't clear the first time, is like whatever change you want in your life, just start small, like radically small, and start really, and then whatever you think is small, start smaller. And then just give yourself the grace to keep going. If you miss a day, let's get back to it. And then build a team of people around you that are going to support you through it. Like whatever changes you want to make in your life, like you can do it. And if you're not sure about the how, reach out. I'm around. I'm easy to get a hold of.
And the great news, Deep Wealth Nation, we're going to have all that in the show notes. And John, because it's still so fresh in your mind when I asked you the traditional question here in the Deep Wealth podcast, as we now go into wrap up mode of going back in time and sharing with yourself some life wisdom or life lessons, or hey, John, do this, but don't do that, in that magical DeLorean car, you had said, hey, Jeffrey, I would tell my younger self, ultimately, everything will be okay. And you've had some time to sleep on that, as the expression
Yeah.
goes. Looking back at that, is there anything that you'd add to that if you could go back in time in that DeLorean car to your younger self?
Between the last time you and I talked, I went back and looked at, I write a letter to my kids when they're 18, and the letter is always the same. It's about how to make good decisions and the three most important decisions you make in your life. And the three most important decisions you make in your life at that age are the choice of vocation you're going to pursue,
Mm-hmm.
the people you're going to spend time with, and what you believe in that's bigger than yourself. And then I talk about the importance of gratitude when you make those decisions. And so if I could have gone back and written myself that letter at 18, it would have been pretty meaningful to me.
Wow. And how would that have been meaningful back at the tender age of 18? What do you think it would have brought out or had you start or stop?
I don't know that I wish anything would have changed. I'm a big believer that I'm really happy with where I am, and the butterfly effect changes everything. So I don't know that I would have changed anything,
Mm-hmm.
but that's been some of the most powerful guidance I've been given in my life by mentors. And so I think the earlier that I would have had it, the better.
Okay. And so a lot for us to think about in terms of that. But what's coming through, and for Deep Wealth Nation, I hope you're picking up on this. John, you're thoughtful, you're deliberate, not to the point of, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, I can't leave the house today. But it's more of, okay, I'm not going to be that ship without the rudder, that proverbial ship without the rudder, where the oceans or
Yeah.
the tides are just going to take it where it's taking it. We can't control what's going to be happening, but we can control our reactions and at least have that North Star in terms of what we're about and where we're heading, and really respect that. And again, it's all in the show notes, but for the benefit of Deep Wealth Nation, if someone does want to reach out, perhaps they or their loved ones, they have type 2 diabetes or they're down that path, they don't know what to do, and their doctor is not telling them the news that they want to hear, where would be the best place to reach you, the team, online, that they can make a difference?
Come find me. Just Precina, PRECINA.com, Precina.com. You can reach out to me directly. I'm very easy to get a hold of on LinkedIn. I have a website, johnoberg.com. Come find me wherever you want to connect with me. You'll find me very easy to get in touch with.
In Deep Wealth Nation, the great news is go to the show notes. It's a point and click. It doesn't get any easier. It's all there for you. And my goodness, John is saying, hey, Deep Wealth Nation, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. And it's coming from an entrepreneur, a post-exit entrepreneur, someone who's been there, done that, has seen all sides of it, an investor. The list just goes on and on when it comes to not just success in business, success in life, and also success with fulfillment. And what I love about that is, to me, that's a holy grail. And words being deliberately chosen there, how we're supposed to be living life. So, John, that said, congratulations. It's official. It's a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me back.
So there you have it, Deep Wealth Nation. What did you think? So with all that said, and as we wrap it up, I have another question for you. Actually, it's more of a personal favor. Did you find this episode helpful? Have you found other episodes of the Deep Wealth Podcast empowering and a game changer for your journey? And if you said yes, and I really hope you did, I have a small but really meaningful way that you can actually help us out and keep these episodes coming to you. Are you ready for it? The dramatic pause. I'll just wait a moment. Drum roll, please. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast channel. When you subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast, you're saving yourself time. Every episode automatically comes to you. And I want you to know that we meticulously craft every one of our episodes to have impactful strategies, stories, expert insights that are designed to help you grow your profits, increase the value of your business, and yes, even optimize your post-exit life and your life right now, whatever you want that to look like. And every time you subscribe and a fellow entrepreneur subscribe, it's a testament to how together, yes, we are changing the social fabric of society. One business owner at a time, one liquidity event at a time. So don't let the momentum stop here. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast channel. You'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear from the top industry leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that are really changing and shaping the business world. And maybe you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're taking a well-deserved break that we spoke all about on this episode. The Deep Wealth Podcast, it's your reliable source for the next big idea that could literally revolutionize your business. So once again, please hit that subscribe button, stay connected, inspired, and ahead of the curve. And again, your next big breakthrough moment, it might just be one episode away. Maybe it was even this episode. So all that said, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your wealth isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about the depth of your journey and the impact that you're creating. So let's continue this journey together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. God bless.